No, I was going through the names. This is a very Jalen and Riley heavy draft. But the problem is they're all spelled differently, so I like tried to do the control F, but the problem is I ran into a lot of creative ways to spell Riley. I was not aware of those. Um, so yeah, my prediction for the later rounds is that they'll come out of this with either a Jalen or a Riley, someone with one of those variations of the name. Um, but my question for you guys, to kind of cap us off here today, is you know looking at it from a 30,000 foot perspective, what is the key to a successful day for the Patriots? And kind of coming back to what Logan was saying when I said he made a good point for once in his life. Um, the last, not just last year, but I think the last 2 years, if you're a Patriots observer, those have been 2 wasted years of your football life. Like, no progress was made, nothing was learned besides the fact that this was not really a premier franchise anymore. And at the very least, I think the movement has now moved towards, well, we're going to have relevant football in one way, shape, or form, even if it is not playoff caliber uh, football being played. So, with that in mind, I think successful draft weekend, they need to come out of this with at least two offensive linemen. One who can start run it right away, and one who can contribute in one way, shape, or form. And beyond that, I almost like don't care. Like they need so many different things that as long as they get at least two playable offensive linemen out of this, they can come out with a outside linebacker, or a strong safety or whatever it might be, because it's something that will bolster them somewhere. Even if it's somewhere where they're like decent now, they're not really good anywhere. And anything that will move them towards really good, regardless of what area of the game it's in, I'll take that as a win.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna speak quickly because unfortunately I have the same exact take, Ben, is competent offensive linemen, which that was obviously a theme for me throughout this, but it's like whether it's Will Campbell or someone else, they need a legitimate day one starter that they can put at tackle. And then after that, it's like, yeah, I don't really care because there are holes all across the roster, which they did fill in a lot of ways, like especially on defense and free agency. But it's like, yeah, if they can shore up the offensive line, I think that's the number one thing that is preventing them from being at least competitive for a wild card spot.
yeah, I
So I
think for
just don't want them to overthink it, would be a
yeah,
success to me. Don't do anything that off the wall because you're desperate.
yeah, I think for me, it's tough. Like, how do you say like what's a successful day? Is it is it looking back, looking at it in hindsight 3 years down the road, or is it in the immediate aftermath? Which is it's hard to say what that is, but for me, it's just raise the floor of the offensive line, not necessarily the ceiling, because like you don't know if you're going to be able to do that. Like, who knows what how these guys will max out, but just raise the floor. And I just think like the clearest way to do that is wherever that first pick is, if they trade back a few spots or stay at four, take it, use it on an offensive tackle prospect, and maybe do the double dip. I know I had Mason Taylor in that second round spot, but I think there's a strong case to be made for double dipping just to give yourself extra insurance in case that first pick winds up being a guard or right tackle. Take someone who has left tackle projectability. So just when you come out of that, you're like, we feel at least a lot better that one way or another, the offensive line won't suck this year. We don't know if it'll be great because who knows, but you can reasonably expect it to not suck. And beyond that, I think, like you said, the rest is gravy. But if they come out of the day confidently feeling they accomplished that goal, then I think it's a win.
I would love to see, like, as it relates to the offensive line, since we keep hammering this, it's like I would love to see some of these guys who are in starting roles just be very good backups. Like Vidarian Lowe, I can live with him if he's going to be one of your first tackles off the bench or your second unit guy. But that's the thing is, it's like they have useful offensive linemen for like a second unit. And so if they get two guys who are useful, I feel like you start raising the value of some of these other guys because you don't have to have Badarian Lowe or whoever out there for 90% of the offensive snaps. So yeah, that's a big one for me. I think a lot rides on that.
I also just think like from a selfish standpoint, like on the draft as a whole, just don't do any head scratchers. Just like for once have a draft that it seems like the Ravens always have or the Eagles always have, where the next day people are like, they did it again. They got like the best player available at that spot. They got the best value every time and at players who make sense for them. And again, who knows how those draft classes age? Like I'd love to look back at all these Ravens draft classes where right after the draft is over, people say they smashed it, and then who knows how they ended up being. But just for once, like no head scratchers, no Jalen Polk in the second round where everyone says it's an overdraft, no Cole Strange in the first round where everyone says it's a dumb pick. Um, just no weirdness, so I don't have
Yeah.
to be inundated with controversy.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. There's always something way too far off the board with them.
Yeah, and like you thought maybe that wouldn't be the case post Belichick, but it was again last year with the Jalen Polk thing. It wasn't not just because he didn't end up performing well, but even in the moment, a lot of people said like that's like more of a third round guy at best, and a lot of
It,
people, and then the Javon Baker pick, you were reading all this stuff, people saying he was off most teams' boards because of the off field stuff. So like, just no head scratchers.
it does make me wonder then, like, especially if they get an offensive lineman early on, if they do just try the best player available thing. Like we've been saying, they have so many holes on the roster. So, like, unless the best player available there is a quarterback or something you really don't need, it's like, why not just go that route and be like, yeah, sure. But that also flies in the face of my theory about like actually building a team now as opposed to just trying to load up on talent.
They do
So,
have holes, but I also think it's overstated. Like they definitely have holes on the offensive line, but at every other position group, like especially on defense, like there are good both established players and players who maybe are promising and could turn into more. I mean, I don't really and receiver, right? The receiver's the other one where you're like obviously they need help there, but there's also good players like Stephon Diggs and maybe Jalen Polk turns into something. But beyond offensive line and receiver, like I don't know how many like brutal holes there are where like they would have to go into this trying to draft for need. I think if they figure out the offensive line thing with the fourth pick and maybe double dip, beyond that, I think they can just draft for best player available. I don't know why they should be panicking at all the other spots. I don't think they're that
Yeah.
far off as other people think they are.
Yeah. To to both of your guys' points, I don't think they have players that like don't belong in the NFL.
No, I don't
You
either.
know, and I think that 2 years ago, Belichick's last year, there were some players that they had. I mean, starting with the quarterbacks who were not professional football players. But now, I look back. I know this is like really like sepia toned glasses that I'm looking back here, but like, who would have thought, going into the year like 2000, 2001, that like Troy Brown would turn into 100 reception wide receiver, or that like Teddy Bruschi is a little undersized converted lineman linebacker would end up being a fulcrum of multiple championships. So, I do think that there is that we have to be careful of situation impacting what we think of individual players, and there is a world in which these guys become very useful players if they're used by a coaching staff that knows its rear end from its elbow.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
my thing about like they have guys who are playing in bigger roles than they should be in. And so that's where, yeah, the coaching comes in and obviously roster building and acquiring more talent. But yeah, I can be a little critical of the amount of talent on the roster just because the last 2 years I haven't seen it. So it's like, yeah, I can see where it's like, all right, maybe there is something to Jalen Polk, but it's like, show me. I can't go off of what I know right now.
Yeah, I think that's the one of the most like overlooked things in all sports really, but I think especially football and baseball is like after every offseason, there's never much conversation on the variable of internal development, right? Like we said, like last year, like we talked about it going into the Red Sox season, like all these variables. What if Tristan Cassis turns into 280 with 35 homers, right? And it's not happening right now, but like that's a huge thing. Or what if Trevor Story goes off, right? And with the Patriots, it's like, going into last year, or after last season, not a lot of things went right, but there were some things that were like I think Marcus Jones now, like I feel good about him as the slot cornerback, and that's a big role, right? I feel good about him there. There were guys who showed you that they do belong, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if like halfway through this year we're like, oh no, Caden Wallace can play, right? Or last year's version of or this year's version of Kayshawn Booty, who where you're like, well, he's not a star, but I do think he can play, and there's a role for him. I'm sure there are going to be players like that on this year's team. It's just you can't obviously bank on that. You never know who that's going to be, but you can almost bank that there will or guarantee that there will be a few guys like that every year.
So, how will you guys be spending the draft?
I'll watch tomorrow.
I'll cash out after the Patriots. I think I have no interest staying up that late for that.
I am working Friday, so I'm on for day 2. So I will probably watch it. I always keep it on passively, like even when after the Patriots pick, like I watched them draft May last year, and I'm just kind of like, all right, whatever. I'll catch up on everything else. So I'll probably take it a little easy tomorrow night, knowing that I have to be locked in Friday.
I think I might. I think I might make it to like mid-teens just to see if the Patriots or someone does something interesting and moves up there. But I'm not going to wait around to like the 20s. I don't think I can do that.
I'm invested in all the rounds more than I have been in years because just the last few years of Belichick, I was in such a malaise. I didn't believe that any of the players were going to pan out. And then last year, I just didn't have any faith that once I was sure that they took Drake May, I was like, okay, I don't think that this group that's in there, although Elliott Wolf is still around, I was like, I don't think that they're going to get anything worth me sticking around and paying attention for. But this year, I'm actually interested for all the reasons you guys have talked about, not just what they're going to do it for, but like to get a sense, like what do we suggest that Vrabel is going to be doing for building his team here for the next, 5, 6, however many years. So, I'll be interested. Will I be locked in constantly? No, but I'll be checking my phone a lot more than I would have been in the past, let's say, 4 to 6 years.
Yeah, right.
That is a very fair point. I
like,
don't
what is their draft
automatically
identity?
assume everyone they pick is a bust.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see like, and that just at the draft as a whole, like what is their draft identity? Like, right away, if they do that Ashton Genty move, which I don't think they're going to do, but if they do something like that, you'd learn a lot about them just with that one pick. Or if they do trade up to like 19, if Tet McMillan falls and they move up to do something like that, you'd learn a lot, and it would be interesting for sure.
You started to see it in free agency with the moves they made. So
Yeah, but even that, I do think I don't know how much I'm gleaning from that because I think a lot of the free agency was about just raising the floor of the team and getting some professionals in the building and just sort of resetting a little bit. Like I don't know if I can come away from this offseason thinking like, oh, every year they're just going to target retreads or players they're familiar with or players they have connections to. I think they want to go into this year be much better than last year. Just compete, establish the culture, and one of the safest ways of doing that is just getting guys in the building that you know what you're getting. That you're not throwing a lot of darts, you're not taking chances on personalities you don't know. I think so. I think them doing that in year one makes a lot of sense. I don't think that necessarily means that that's what they're going to do, going forward each offseason. But if they do make some crazy trade or crazy, like aggressive pick in the draft, I think that would be like, okay, that's how this group's going to operate.